"You're asking for a what?" I said, folding my hands slowly across the table. Michael shifted in his seat across from me, trying to manage that crooked, overconfident smile he always used when talking to people he thought were beneath him. But today he looked nervous, desperate even. The conference room we sat in wasn't his anymore. Not really. Not after what he did, and especially not after what I became. "I'm asking if there's any way we can renegotiate the lease," he said, voice tight. 40% is substantial. I mean, come on, Rebecca. We've been in this building for over a decade. I tilted my head. 12 years, to be exact. His face twitched, caught off guard by my precision. "Right." He nodded. "Exactly. We've been good tenants, never missed a payment. This hike, it's going to put real pressure on our operating budget. I'm not saying we can't pay it, just we need time to adjust." I leaned back in my chair and opened the binder in front of me. Inside, spreadsheets, timelines, lease term summaries, all the data he used to rely on me to deliver back when I was his operations manager, before he fired me, before he replaced me with his nephew, before he realized whose name was buried beneath layers of corporate shell companies. "Let's review," I said calmly, tapping the paper. "You dismissed your most experienced manager without notice. You replaced her with a kid who nearly lost your biggest contract within 2 months. You hemorrhaged staff. You dropped your retention rate below 70%. That disqualifies you from rate lock eligibility under our updated renewal program." He blinked, then frowned. "You mean you wrote that policy?" I smiled. "Correct." He swallowed hard. "So you're going to punish me, us, just because of how I handled a personnel change?" I closed the binder, letting the silence do the rest of the talking. When I finally looked up again, my tone was soft, precise. I'm not punishing you, Michael. I'm applying the same business logic you used when you let me go." He stared, words caught behind his lips. Then finally, a whisper. "You own the building." "I do," I said. "Southbridge Holdings. That name on your lease? That's me." And that was the moment he realized the ground he stood on, quite literally, belonged to the woman he tried to erase. I slid the new lease terms across the table. "You can accept the new rate," I said, standing up. "Or you can relocate, though I hear it's tough to move CNC equipment on short notice." I didn't wait for a reply. I'd already heard everything I needed. My name is Rebecca Martinez. I'm 45 years old, born and raised in Chicago. And for over a decade, I was the woman who held the bones and nerves of Stonewell Precision Manufacturing together. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't loud. But if a shipment was late, a vendor missed specs, or a safety report had a decimal out of place, I fixed it. I was the person every department secretly relied on, even if no one said it out loud, especially not Michael. The owner, 12 years. That's how long I gave that company. I showed up early, stayed late, covered for others, trained new hires, and saved them hundreds of thousands through workflow optimizations I created from scratch. I didn't ask for raises, often. I didn't demand recognition. I just delivered, quietly, consistently. Michael liked that about me. Or maybe he just liked that I didn't get in the way. Until I did. I don't have a family, no husband, no kids. People often assumed that meant I must be lonely, or worse, that I had no life. But what I had was something far more valuable: clarity. I knew exactly where my time, energy, and money went, and I invested all three wisely. While others in the office leased new SUVs or splurged on lakefront condos, I drove the same Honda for 10 years and lived in a one-bedroom apartment I bought at auction during the 2008 crash. I didn't say much, but every bonus I earned, every tax refund, every consulting check I took on the side, I invested. Over time, I built up enough to partner with a small but savvy real estate investment group. We formed an LLC, Southbridge Holdings. Nothing flashy, no big announcements, just quiet acquisitions, slow renovations, strategic tenants. 6 months before Michael fired me, Southbridge closed on a 6-unit industrial property on the south side of Chicago. A mix of distribution, light manufacturing, and office space. A solid addition to the portfolio. One of those tenants, Stonewell Precision Manufacturing. Michael had no idea. The LLC name was generic. I never used my full name on anything. I was listed as a managing partner, but even that was buried behind a trust. It wasn't about secrecy. It was about leverage. And as I would soon learn, that leverage was exactly what I needed. Because what happened next wasn't just betrayal. It was stupidity dressed in a suit. It started with a closed-door meeting on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Michael summoned me to his office without an agenda. Never a good sign. His voice on the intercom was clipped, impersonal. I walked in to find him already seated, a manila folder on his desk, a forced smile stretched too wide across his face. Next to him sat Kyle, his 25-year-old nephew, who'd joined the company barely 4 months ago. Kyle had a finance degree, a loud laugh, and a habit of calling people champ. He also wore cologne strong enough to fumigate an entire break room and once confused a purchase order with a packing slip. Michael gestured toward the chair across from them. "Rebecca, thanks for coming in. Let's make this quick," I sat down, smoothing the front of my blouse, bracing myself. I'd seen the signs for weeks. Kyle being included in meetings he had no reason to attend, getting copied on executive emails, offering suggestions about streamlining processes, without understanding the first thing about how we actually built or delivered product. Still, I hadn't expected this. "We've decided to take the operations department in a new direction," Michael began, as if reading from a script. "Kyle will be stepping into a leadership role starting Monday." I didn't say anything. I just watched his eyes, watched the way they avoided mine. "We appreciate everything you've done here. 12 years is no small thing." I nodded once. "No severance discussion?" He blinked. "We're offering a 2-week package and outplacement services. HR will be in touch." Kyle leaned forward, grinning like this was a promotion party. "No hard feelings, right? It's just business." I stood up slowly. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't say a word. Because in that moment all I could think was, this building, this desk, this fake smile, heir to nothing. It's all sitting inside a property I own. I walked back to my office with deliberate calm. The floor seemed quieter than usual, like the walls were holding their breath. A few employees looked up from their screens as I passed. A couple glanced away, quickly, unsure if they were allowed to meet my eyes. I packed my things methodically, the plaque with my name, my mug, the plant I somehow kept alive for over a decade. I didn't take the company-issued laptop. I didn't even clear the whiteboard. I wanted them to see the numbers I left behind. Projections, schedules, reports. They wouldn't understand without me. As I walked out, the rain had turned to sleet. I didn't cry. I didn't slam any doors. I just tightened my scarf and stepped into the cold with the quiet satisfaction of someone holding a secret. Because while Michael thought he'd removed me from his company, he'd actually just handed me control. The email arrived exactly 27 days after my last shift at Stonewell. It was from a commercial real estate broker representing a development firm, Brightcore Holdings. They were making inquiries about the Southbridge Industrial Complex, the property we had acquired 6 months prior. Specifically, they were interested in purchasing the lot for nearly double what our group had paid. The tone of the message was polite but urgent. Apparently, a city expansion project had been announced 2 weeks earlier, and suddenly the industrial corridor that had once been considered a sleepy logistics zone was now prime real estate. Timing, as always, was everything. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I pulled up Stonewell's lease. Triple net, 12 months remaining, no renewal guarantees. I scrolled through the tenant list. 5 other companies, 3 of which had excellent employee retention ratings and positive cash flow. I scheduled private meetings with each of them over the next week. One by one, I explained my intentions. As of the next lease cycle, I told them, rents will increase by 40%, unless you qualify for our new retention-based stabilization program. If your workforce retention stays above 90% and your organization demonstrates ethical employment practices, you'll be eligible for a 5-year rate lock at your current price. It was direct, fair, and best of all, strategic. Most of them accepted on the spot. They understood what I was building. A workplace ecosystem where stable employers were rewarded, and those who viewed employees as disposable would pay a premium for that arrogance. I saved Stonewell for last. The meeting was scheduled through a property manager. No names were disclosed. Michael thought he was walking into a routine landlord negotiation with someone from Southbridge Holdings. He showed up late. Kyle trailed behind him, already sweating through his shirt. The kid looked overwhelmed, and if I had to guess, he'd spent the past few weeks fumbling through projects he didn't understand and burning goodwill faster than he could fake his way out of it. They didn't recognize me right away. I was seated at the far end of the boardroom table, dressed in neutral tones, hair swept up, a folder in front of me, no nameplate. No smile. "Sorry we're late," Michael muttered as he sat down. "Parking." The property manager gave a brief introduction, outlined the renewal terms, and explained the new pricing structure. Michael blinked hard. "Wait, 40%? He barked. "That can't be right. We've been in this building 12 years. I cleared my throat. Michael looked at me, squinting. "I'm sorry. Who are you?" he asked. I leaned forward, opened the folder, and turned it to face him. "My name is Rebecca Martinez," I said quietly. "Managing partner, Southbridge Holdings. We own this property. I believe you and I used to work together." Kyle made a strangled choking sound. Michael froze. "This is a joke," he muttered. "It's not," I replied. "But the new lease, terms are very real." He stared at the papers in front of him. "You're increasing our rent out of spite." "I'm increasing your rent," I said, "because your company fails to meet the standards of our rate stabilization program. High turnover, poor morale, no protection for long-term employees." He said nothing. I stood slowly, gathering my folder. "But I'll give you a choice. Accept the new terms, or vacate by the end of your lease. Either way, I suggest you start looking into commercial movers. I hear it's expensive to relocate industrial-grade manufacturing equipment." I paused at the door, turned and added one final note. "Oh, and Michael, you might want to hire someone who actually knows how to manage operations." Then I left. The echo of their silence followed me down the hall like music. I didn't hear from Michael for 3 days. Then, Late on a Thursday evening, I got the email.subject line, request for private discussion. Urgent, the message was short. He asked to meet off the record, without the property manager, to explore possible solutions. It was laced with just enough desperation to make me smile. I let it sit unread for a full 24 hours before replying. I'm available. Monday at 9 a.m. Please bring any relevant decision makers. When I walked into the boardroom that morning, Michael was already there, alone this time. His tie was loosened, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He stood up when I entered, probably out of habit more than respect. "Rebecca?" he said, attempting a smile. "You look well." "I am," I said. "Shall we?" He nodded, cleared his throat, and launched into a speech he'd clearly rehearsed. I made a mistake. I should have handled your departure differently. Kyle wasn't ready. I see that now. The team's fractured. Production delays. Supplier complaints. Clients are starting to notice. I let the silence stretch. "We can't afford a 40% rent increase," he continued. "And moving is off the table. Our machinery's too specialized and the zoning here is grandfathered. We'd be out of compliance anywhere else." "So what are you asking?" "I want to make this right," he said. "We'd like to qualify for the rate lock program." I raised an eyebrow. "To qualify, you'd need to meet employee retention and leadership accountability metrics. Right now, you don't." "We're willing to make changes," he said carefully, "including personnel." I waited. "I've let Kyle go," he said, finally meeting my eyes. "He's back on the job market. I gave him a reference, but he understands this wasn't a good fit." I said nothing, just kept watching. "I want to bring you back," he continued, voice low. "Not as an employee, as a consultant. Name your hours, name your rate." I opened my notebook, turned to a prepared page, and slid it toward him. "Here are my terms," I said. He picked it up and read, "Monthly retainer at 3 times my previous. Salary authority to rebuild the operations team. Remote first with optional site visits. 5-year contract minimum. Renewal pending performance metrics." He looked stunned. "This is non-negotiable," I finished. He looked down, rubbed his temples, and then nodded. "Fine. You win." "This was never about winning, Michael," I said as I stood to leave. "This was about correcting the idea that loyalty is weakness." I walked out of the room and down the hallway, my hallway now, with a contract in place and leverage secured. By noon, the signed agreement was sitting in my inbox. That afternoon, I reactivated my old operations framework, sent 3 emails to former staff members I trusted, and approved 1 modest request from the janitorial vendor that had been ignored since I left. By the end of the week, I'd restored productivity by 11%. By the end of the month, Stonewell was profitable again, and this time I was billing them for every minute. By the end of that first quarter, the difference was visible from every floor. The production line ran smoother, lead times shortened, employee sick days dropped. There was a rhythm returning to the place, one that Michael's spreadsheets couldn't track. But I could feel in the way people walked through the halls again, shoulders a little less tense, voices a little more alive. And it wasn't just about operations. It was about trust. The same people who once avoided eye contact when I was fired now lingered by my office door, or rather, my Zoom window. They asked questions, gave updates, shared frustrations they didn't dare voice under Kyle's half-baked leadership. I made it clear I wasn't back to reclaim a title. I was here to rebuild a structure, and that meant empowering the people who had kept things running long before the Nephew with the designer watch and zero instincts showed up. Michael kept his distance, which I preferred. His emails were curt and professional, and that was fine. He was swallowing his pride one invoice at a time, and make no mistake, my invoices were steep. Every month my consultancy fee hit their accounts like clockwork, triple the salary I once earned. No negotiating, no questions. Because for the first time, Michael understood what I was worth, not just as a manager, but as a strategist, as someone who could look 10 steps ahead and see exactly where the cliff was forming. Meanwhile, Southbridge Holdings, my LLC, continued to thrive. The other tenants in the building, the ones who treated their employees like people instead of disposable cogs, remained locked in at their original rates. Word began to spread that our property was pro-worker, without the politics, just policies. Ethical business got rewarded. Everyone else paid market plus a reminder of what poor culture costs. A columnist from Crane's Chicago Business got wind of the model and wrote a feature. Called it the anti-vulture model of commercial real estate. I didn't give them my name. Just said I was a former ops lead who got tired of watching good companies die under bad leaders. The article went viral. In private, I received emails from other operations managers, accountants, even custodial leads asking how I'd done it. How did you become the owner? How did you stay quiet long enough to use that power effectively? And the answer was simple. I didn't rush. I observed. I documented. I waited. Back at Stonewell, my influence stretched quietly. Michael began citing my reports in board meetings. One of the senior engineers who'd left months after I was terminated reached out to rejoin, only if Rebecca was still involved. I approved his return in under an hour. Kyle, on the other hand, was never mentioned again. Last I heard, he was managing a strip mall renovation project in Des Moines. A LinkedIn post showed him smiling in a hard hat that looked freshly unboxed. I didn't comment. I didn't need to. Some lessons have to come from life, not from former bosses. As the fiscal year came to a close, Michael scheduled a one-on-one video call. He looked tired, but more grounded than I remembered. I just wanted to say... He paused, unsure. I waited. You were right. About everything. I never should have let you go. I nodded once. Now you know why I didn't fight it. He sighed. You had a bigger plan all along. No, I said. But I had something better. Perspective. The call ended cordially. No hard feelings left to manage. Just an understanding forged by consequences that what I'd built could never be undone again. This time the systems had my name on them, and the keys to the building. They'd never left my hand. 6 months later, I stood on the rooftop terrace of the Southbridge Industrial Complex, coffee in hand, watching the city rise with the morning. From this vantage point, I could see every corner of the property, trucks backing into docks, forklifts humming across the pavement, employees chatting over breakfast burritos outside the main break room. There was motion, but it wasn't frantic. It was synchronized, calm, deliberate, like a place that had finally remembered how to breathe. Below me, Stonewell Precision was thriving again, and Michael, well, he was staying out of the way, which was smart. He still owned the company, technically, but now he listened to the team. Now he understood that operations wasn't just about processes, it was about people. People like Maria, who ran the shipping department with one arm and a steel trap memory. People like Jamil, who built a real-time inventory app on his lunch break and never once asked for credit. People like me. 12 years of loyalty had been treated like luggage when I was let go. But what Michael never understood, what most people never understand, is that you can't fire infrastructure. You can only ignore it until it owns the deed to your future. I took another sip of coffee as my phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Meeting with a new tenant, a logistics firm moving into Suite 6B. They were requesting consideration for rate stabilization. I already had my criteria pulled up. Employee, retention over 95%. 0 involuntary terminations in 18 months. Paid family leave? Weekly staff-led feedback forums. Good. They'd qualify. That was the beauty of this model. You reward those who build, not those who extract. Back when I was a salaried manager, my influence ended at my job title. But now, I controlled the landscape. I could design incentives that favored ethics over expedience. I could shape policy that made good leadership a competitive advantage. And best of all, I could do it without raising my voice. As I headed downstairs, I passed a framed newspaper article hanging in the entryway. The Cranes feature. There was a quote beneath the headline, one I'd agreed to anonymously. Sometimes the best revenge isn't taking power back. It's realizing you were the power all along. That night, I emailed my investment partners at Southbridge Holdings. We were close to securing another property on the west side. Same model, new zip code. One step closer to turning a single story of silent retaliation into a blueprint for something bigger. And that's how I learned the most satisfying revenge. Doesn't come from watching someone fail. It comes from building something so strong, so undeniable, they have no choice but to succeed on your terms. Not because they want to, but because you've made it the only option left. And that's how I learned that revenge doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes the best revenge is simply holding the contract, while they realize they just signed away their leverage. Have you ever been underestimated by someone in power? Let me know how you would have handled it. And if this story made you think twice about loyalty, share it with someone who needs to. Hear it. Stay tuned for more real-life revenge stories where karma wears a business suit.